Dr. Laurel Vermillion, who is president of Sitting Bull Tribal College. We are pleased that you're here. I'm sure that we will get some great insights from her. My name is David Dowalter. I serve as provost of Central Connecticut State University, and we're so pleased to have this event on an annual basis in which we actually take a look at civil rights issues and really consider very strongly the experiences that our guests have had. So, Stephen, would you like to come up and introduce our speaker?
Thank you, David. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the fall 2019 Civil Rights, Human Rights lecture series here at Central Connecticut State University. Before I introduce our distinguished speaker, and I said distinguished speaker, I had a chance this summer to meet with her and do some work on the reservation on Civil College. I was really impressed. I want to thank, obviously, David Provost, President Toro, who's probably not here today because of our prior engagements. But I also want to acknowledge some of the folks in the last 10 years, the 10 years I've been doing this, who've been supporting the lecture series here at Central Connecticut State University. I want to welcome all the students from Craft, the high school students from New Brooklyn, Connecticut. Thanks for coming out. Hope to see you guys here in the fall. I also want to thank Larry, Gerald, music professor. Thank you for all your support for the past 10 years. Mr. Nigai, psychology. Thank you also for supporting the lecture series here at CCSU. Dr. Phillips, Dr. Audra King, my colleague, also social justice professor. Also want to thank a couple of folks, couple of officers, department, or school of education, and the dean is somewhere around, Kimberly. Thank you for hostess helping us out. Office of Student Conduct, Mrs. Stephanie Reyes, probably in the meeting right now. Office of Alumni Development, Chris Gallagher. Aetna Insurance Company, Steve Kligler, Public Policy, I think I saw him somewhere around. Steve, thank you. And Student Affairs, thank all those folks who give us an opportunity to hear civil rights and human rights. Ladies and gentlemen, the indigenous experience, human rights experience, civil rights experience is a story that has to be told. We continue to ignore their plight, and as a result, we have become oblivious to their struggle and exclusion to many of the opportunities here in the United States. Interestingly enough, we live in a country that preaches democracy and tolerance. Unfortunately, that democracy and tolerance hasn't been provided to all ethnic groups in this country. Our distinguished speaker for the last 20 years has been advocating for indigenous rights and respect. As president of Sitting Bull College, he is committed towards providing academic opportunities to many in the Standing Rock Reservation. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome for the first time in the state of Connecticut and for the first time at Central Connecticut State University, Dr. Laurel Vermillion.
Which means good day to all of you. Laurel Vermillion Imachapi, Oyate Liangapiwi Imachapi. My Lakota name is seen by her nation. It was a name that was given to me when I received my master's degree. And it was a name that was passed down from a great-great-grandmother. And so I carry that name with much pride and humility. Thank you. It's tough to get a bottle of water here. Thank you for asking me to come and be your speaker. Special thanks to Dr. Steve Balkaran.
Yes.
And Steve was on Standing Rock. He came down, I believe it was in about August of this past year, and wanted to visit our schools and came to see me. But I really appreciate the fact that he took the time to come to see Standing Rock, to come to visit the schools, to come to visit the people, and to come to see for himself what a reservation of Native Americans would look like. And so many people talk about the reservations, but they don't actually come to see us. So, Dr. Steve, thank you so much for taking that time. I'm an enrolled member of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. We are located on the Standing Rock Reservation, and we're located in North Dakota, southern North Dakota, and northern South Dakota. We encompass about 2.1 million I was born in the early 50s, and I lived on the reservation for most of my life. My parents were ranchers. Both my mother and my father and their parents were fluent Lakota speakers. I grew up on a ranch, and I grew up knowing and learning how to work really hard. I'm going to tell you a little story about my first remembering of a childhood experience. And I'm going to tell you why I told you that story. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, we lived in the country about 2 miles from the Missouri River. And we lived about 100 yards from my grandparents, my father's mother and father. And I spent most of my days as a child with them, learning all of how to dry food, how to prepare food, how to get plants that you needed, all from nature. And so I really had a cherished childhood learning from my grandparents. But the story I want to tell you was when we went to get water at the river. We had a team of horses, and so I would ride with my grandfather and my grandmother down to the river. And just before we got to the river, there was this huge area of trees. I used to call it the forest. You would go in there. It would be a hot day. You'd go through that forest, and it was so cool. And you could hear the birds, you could hear the animals, you could smell the dirt, and you could smell. I just remember it so well. Then you would come out at the other end, and then my grandfather would back his team into the water, and then he'd have a couple of barrels that he filled with water and put a tarp over, and then we would come out again. And on our way back, through the forest, through the trees, we would stop, and we had huge containers that we filled with wild grapes. Grapes that were just hanging from the vines. Our hands would be purple and our mouths would be purple because we always managed to eat most of it. So we would stop there and pick these grapes, and then we would go home with our water. So again, this is my earliest remembering. I was about 5 or 6 years old. And about 1962, they completed one of the dams. There's a number of dams along the Missouri River that were built. And those dams took away all of that I just talked to you about. No longer did we have the clean water, and no longer did we have the trees and the vegetation and the animals and all of that. It was all flooded. Everything was flooded and taken away. And I didn't understand how that worked because I was a child until later I started to learn about the dams, and I learned that nobody came and asked, hey, what do you think about this? Should we do this? Is this a good idea? No, they did it, and they flooded the land that we lived on. The whole areas that we went to for hunting and for berry picking, and so it was taken. That was a hard thing to know and to learn. It also took away homes because many people lived real close to the river, and so they had to move. The small community that I come from is called Kennel. It's named after a priest. But the small community on Standing Rock that I come from had to be moved from its original site up to the hill because of the flood. So to me, that was a devastating event that happened to us. Okay, the next thing I'll share with you is I went to a country school and I loved it. It's where I learned to appreciate education. It's where I went to appreciate good teachers. I had an excellent teacher. She was a little lady named Hope Chamberlain. And if you're not familiar with the country school, it's grades 1 through 8. And so that experience to me helped me to want to go into education. And so we learned a lot of excellent things. But I didn't learn anything about my Native American culture. And I don't know if you've heard the word assimilation. Well, I was in that era of assimilation, okay? I told you my grandparents and my parents were Lakotas, and they spoke Lakota, but they never, ever taught me. I am not a fluent speaker of my language, and it hurts me a lot. And I asked the question of my parents, why don't I know my language, my beautiful language? And my mother said, well, when we went to boarding school, we were disciplined harshly for speaking our language, and so we didn't want you to ever have to go through that. So I never learned my beautiful language. Also, the 1978 American Indian Religious Freedom Act, which was 41 years ago. 1978, okay? I was already graduated high school. And it's what the TCU's, what it does is it granted the tribes the right to practice our own beautiful customs and religions. Can you imagine not being able to do that? And this was in 1978. So it's no wonder. It's no wonder my generation, we do not know who we are. And so I tell the story that I said, I was lost. I didn't know who I was, okay? I went to a country school. There was a lot of diversity. We had Native students there. We had a lot of German students there because their parents were farmers in that area. So it was a diverse education that I got. But as I got older, I started to wonder, okay, I'm Native American, I'm an Indian. How come I don't know a lot about my own culture? I don't. Nobody's teaching me. And so again, I asked my parents, and they said, well, we have to live in the white man's world. This is changing for us. We're no longer going to, live with the Native American on the reservation. We're going to open up the doors to you. So I started college at my college that I'm now president of. And it was one of 6 first tribal colleges that were starting back in the early 70s. And so it's 1973. I had just graduated high school, and I was working as a teacher's aide, and they call them paras now for Head Start in my community. I had just gotten married at the age of 18. And then I became friends with a mover and a shaker back then. His name was Dr. Jack Barden. And he said, Laurel, he said, we're starting a tribal college. You should come and take classes. And I said, absolutely, I will. Because I love school and I love learning. So that started my higher education journey. And we didn't even have a building yet. And so I tell the story that we would follow Dr. Jack Barden, about 5 of us students, to around in a new building, which was in 4/8 at the time, in the hallways or in looking for a room that wasn't being used. It was called the Douglas Sky Memorial Complex. We would find an area to sit and have class. That's how City Hall College started, and it was called Standing Rock Community College. And that's the story that pretty much every one of the 37 tribal colleges can tell you. They all started in a very humble way. But they started because they knew, the movers and shakers, the leaders back then, they knew that our students were not being successful when they went on to state colleges and universities. They wouldn't, maybe they wouldn't last a year, but the majority of them would quit, they'd drop out. And so our leaders back then said, we need to do something. We need to start our own tribal colleges. So the students that are coming to us can learn about who they are. And so it began for me. I started to learn for the first time, 18 years old, about who I really was as a Native person. And it made a huge difference to me. Huge, because I started to learn what a beautiful way of life we had. I didn't know that. And so, and we're still doing that. We're still teaching our students that come to us about who they really are, because they're not learning it anyplace else. You see, way back when the Native Americans lived here and the first people came, they made sure that they changed it so that we couldn't speak our languages. They took us out of our homes and they put us in boarding schools and they cut our hair. And, well, you know that story. You know that story. And if you don't, I encourage you to read and to hear and to learn the story. And as Native Americans, we can be bitter, we can be angry at what happened to us. But some of us are, but we also know that we can learn about who we are because we have a beautiful, beautiful culture. We are one with nature, and I think some of you probably have heard a little bit about the fight with NODAPL, Dakota Access Pipeline. Okay, that was huge. This was back in about 2016, and that was huge. It was right on a reservation, probably about 8 miles from our campus, and people from everywhere, countries, other countries, came to help us because they understood that what we were fighting for was simple. It was clean water, access, and continued access to clean water, period. That's what we were fighting for. But the state of North Dakota made it into something ugly. They made it into something that we were causing trouble and we were stopping the production of this oil pipeline that was needed to go through to haul all this oil. And so they made it really sound like we were terrible people, when in fact all we wanted was the access and continued access to clean water. So I encourage you, if you don't know about that, I encourage you to read and to study about it a little bit. Okay, on our campuses, the tribal colleges, we're doing a lot because we understand, again, that we need to teach and help our students learn about who they really are. Now, we're doing a lot with language revitalization. So I just shared with you, I'm not a fluent speaker, which hurts me. But what I can do is make sure that my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren and those coming after them will learn the language. And so there's a number of things that Sitting Bull College is doing. One is we have a Lakota language immersion nest right on our campus. So we have 2.5-year-old students, our children, who are coming to us, and they're immersed in the Lakota language all day. I have a 2.5-year-old grandson going in there. And just to see when they're singing the prayer songs, it just, my heart, even now I'm getting goosebumps because it just makes me feel so good that the children are learning. I also have a 6-year-old granddaughter who's in the older classroom, and they are immersed in the Lakota language all morning, and then in the afternoon they do English and Lakota when they're studying about reading and science and those kinds of things. So that's one thing we're doing to make sure that our children are learning their beautiful language. We also have a summer institute, a 3-week summer institute, because back when I was a teacher in the elementary school, we would have an Indian studies teacher in our classroom, but what was happening is that even though that teacher what may have been a fluent speaker, an elder and a fluent speaker, they didn't know how to teach the language. And so what was happening is that every year, okay, you would learn colors, and then you would learn body parts, and then you would learn to count from 1 to 10, all in the language. And then the next year, guess what? You learn the same thing again. So every year, that's all that was being taught, and it wasn't ever moving into more of like a conversation. And so we have this institute now on our campus, usually in June, and we are teaching teachers how to teach the language. And we've been doing that now for about 8 years, and we're starting to see the difference. We're starting to see that the children are learning. The schools that, we have 9 schools on the reservation, they're starting to work more with the students so that the children are learning. And the children are teaching us about our beautiful language. Okay. Okay, I'm going to give you some resources, some books that I have read, books that I have used in some of my classes. And so the first one is Joseph Marshall III. If you Google him, you'll find a lot of books that he has written. And I find that these books are easy to read, they're fun to read, and it shares a lot of information for you. So Joseph Marshall III. The other one is Kent Nerburn, and you may have heard of the movie Neither Wolf Nor Dog. Okay, there's a movie out now with one of his books. And so I would encourage you to read. I've read 3 of his books, and I like each one of them. So Kent Nerburn and Neither Wolf Nor Dog is the name of his first book. The other one is Ella DeLauria, and she has written Water Lily, which I would recommend. And Diane Wilson, who has written Beloved Child. And all of these books are going to share with you some of the traditions, some of the customs, some of the beliefs, some of our values, which are very beautiful. One of our values that I'll share with you is generosity. Now, back when our leaders were not elected, they were leaders because of what they did and how they provided and led the people. And so this is I think an indication of our government now today that we have on the reservations. It doesn't work well because we have an election process and we have popularity. And so people are elected because they're popular, not because they're able to be a good leader. And so we have to really try to figure out how to go back to traditionally how that was done, because it worked really well. And if you were following a leader and that leader was doing things you didn't like, you just stopped following them and you moved on to somebody else, or you became your own leader. And so we're really looking at those kinds of things at our colleges because we want what's best for our families. We do a lot of work with our families. We do a lot of work with the schools, the K-12 schools. We're just looking at a partnership because it's hard to, because we're so rural and we don't have housing available. So it's hard to find instructors and to keep them. The instructors usually have to drive a ways, probably about 50 miles from Bismarck. And we have some really, really harsh winters. And so people don't like to drive on our roads during winter. So we're partnering with the high schools on sharing instructors. So you see a lot of that happening in not only our college, but all the other colleges that are out there. Okay. So it looks like we're going to be winding down. I want to just thank you for inviting me again. I love visiting other colleges. I love visiting other campuses. I love talking to students because the belief in our native culture is that we are all related. It's Mataki Oyase. And that means we are all related. Not only the peoples, not only the you and me, but we are all related to all living things. Mataki Oyase. You're related to the trees, the plants, the animals. That is our belief. And so we value all of those things because they are our relatives. So in closing, this is a part of our vision statement at City Hall College. And it's let us put our minds together and see what life we can make for our children. And this was spoken by our namesake, City Hall. So Pilami Yaye, thank you for listening.
The indigenous experience. I do advise all the students who have a chance to go to North Dakota and actually go to the Cinnamon College and also see South Dakota and see Mount Rushmore, the reservations. But I'd like to ask the first question, being able to do the rights and civil rights in this whole lecture series. I often pose a question to African American civil rights activists who are growing on campus and also pose the same question to you. Do you think the government owes you an apology for taking your identity away?
They have not taken our identity away. They tried. They tried. We're still here, and we're stronger. And our students are walking very well in two worlds. They're walking in their native world because we're teaching them about who they are, and they're walking in the non-native world because they're being educated and getting degrees.
And what does standing rock mean to you? There was a whole, protest last 2 summers ago into the winter, and we brought LaDonna here last year, and she had an interesting story about this. The whole pipeline boycott and reservation and so forth. So what would the boycott mean to you and standing rock?
Yeah. Well, when it was happening, we were getting, like I said, we were getting people from all over. And many of them would stop at the college, and so we got to meet a lot of people from everywhere. And just the other night at the hotel I'm staying here in town, the lady that works at the desk introduced herself to me, and she said, I came to Standing Rock when there was that fight with the pipeline. So wherever I go, if they know I'm from Standing Rock, they know about what happened. And it was, and we say that it's water protectors. They're calling us protesters, but we're really water protectors because, like I explained, we are related. We're related to the water and the wind and the air. So these are our relatives, and we don't want oil on them or in them. That's the bottom line. It's so simple. And so we said, no, we don't want the pipeline coming through our river. We don't want the pipeline causing a possible break and ruining our clear drinking water. We don't want that. And so that was the whole fight with DAPL. But we, of course, didn't win that fight. But what happened with that is all of the tribes that came from everywhere, even other countries, I think they felt this bond with each other. We felt like we were one. And so to me, that was a win.
There's 573 tribes. It's an interesting story. I'd like to open for questions to my students in the audience. Go ahead. Use the mic right if you want to.
So, not to be generally cynical here, but I definitely believe there has to be a balance between progress and conservation of what's already existing. I'm definitely for green energy movements and stopping people from destroying what's available. But in your eyes, what do you believe is the right way and the best way to go about progress and getting to that position that you can
Thank you for that question. In fact, since 2016, when there was the fight with the pipeline, since then, people out there and people that have money and funding are saying, we want to help. And so just about 15 miles down from us in one of the communities, Cannonball, North Dakota, there was some funders who gave them money so that they have a solar farm. So they built the solar farm now that's helping to, bring energy to their community. There's also funders out there. On our campus, we have a wind turbine. In fact, we have 2 of them. So, and there's funders out there who are saying, we can, help you if you want more wind turbines because they're not cheap, they're very expensive. So these are the kinds of things that people are seeing and wanting to help with. Another one is, I had a funder check that came across my desk. I didn't recognize who it was. And they said it's a new funder because of the fight with the pipeline. What they're doing is they're giving this huge scholarships to any of your students who are wanting to pursue anything in environmental science, especially environmental law. So see, people are on board. They know and they understand that, you know what, we have one planet, we have one Earth here. Unjimaka, which we call Mother or Grandmother Earth, one. And so if we don't take care of her, and that goes away, and she goes away, what's going to happen to us? And I'm thinking about my great-grandchildren and their children. We better make sure that, they have someplace clean and someplace that they can live on.
Questions?
What is the largest challenge or crisis within the reservation now today, you suggest?
Yeah, good question. I could probably talk another hour, but I know we have a time limit here, but just quickly in a nutshell. And I'll just give you my thoughts on why this is such a big challenge. And I talked to you a little bit about how my parents and their parents were taken out of the homes and put into boarding schools and treated like military, okay? So when they're taken out of the home for 4, 5, 6 years, they don't and aren't able to learn about their home and the values that are being taught there, and about their parents being good parent role models and all of that. So my theory, just my theory now, is that when that happened, there was a whole cycle that started. Because now, when those individuals came home, they didn't know how to be good parents because they weren't home to see what parenting looks like. And so I was gone, say that student was gone 6 years or so. They came home, they were lost. They didn't have all of that. And so when they had families, then they didn't know how to be a parent because that was taken away from them. And so then now we're in a cycle of our families not knowing how to be good parents. And so if you're not a good parent, you don't know how to be a good parent, then your children are going to have problems. And so what's happening now is we have a lot of addiction. We have a lot of drug and alcohol addiction. And so somehow we need to combat that. And I know when you asked the question about, do you think the government should apologize? Instead of apologizing, they need to help fix this problem that they helped create. And so, you help us to come up with some projects. Think outside the box. Come in, let's sit down at the table and talk about where do we start with this problem and how do we fix it? Because like I said, it's not their fault that they were taken away and not taught about their beautiful culture and about how to be a parent, and it's not their fault. And then we also all know the stories of the abuse that went on. You know, so let's be honest. Let's tell the truth. Let's be honest about, you know, those things that happen, because it's only then that you can try to fix it if you are, you know, if you tell the truth.
Good question.
Great answer. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Hi. In 10 years, where would you like your community to be, and like what goals do you have for it?
Wow. 10 years. Okay. In 10 years, I'd like our community to be healthy. I'd like our community to go back to some of the things where you use the land. We had huge gardens, you know, back. We don't do a lot of that anymore. We do at the college, but the communities don't. So I'd like us to go back and use the natural, the land, the earth, and everything to help us to be better people. I'd also like us again to be able to, like I said, live in two worlds, walk in two worlds, and to remember who you are, remember who we are as Native people, and have that pride and have those values in place. Be good parents, be good grandparents, but also be able to have a job, be an administrator, do whatever you want to do anything you want to do as far as a degree. That's where I would like us to be.
Dr. Phillips, yes.
Thank you so much for your presentation and enlightening us. You said that Standing Rock was a failure in terms of, you know, the community development. What could you think be changed where, you know, we would not have the pipeline, we would not have the risk? And the second part is, how do you see what happens at Standing Rock related to what happened in Flint and other parts of the world?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, if they didn't put the pipeline through the river, we would have won. I mean, that was an option. But they brought things like, well, we were trucking it, but then the trucks have problems, and so, and we just, every time, you know, we just kept getting beat down. And if you have a strong administration, and that's what they want, that's what they're gonna get. So I'm not sure how we could have done anything different. I think we did everything that we could do. I don't see anything that we could have done more of. And as far as now Flint, Michigan, help me remember, that's the water. Okay, and you want me to talk about?
You know, because one of the things that's happening globally is that water is becoming like a new goal.
Yes.
That people are extracting water, put it in bottles, and send it somewhere else. And the indigenous communities throughout the world are, you know, having their natural resources stripped away from them. You know, in Flint, it was a case where they, you know, changed the source of the water and put it into a very contaminated source.
Mhm.
And then, of course, the children had lead reached into their bodies.
Mhm.
So these are kind of concerns.
Yeah, I know I heard the story that, because this fight with the Dakota pipeline is still going, but it's going with the lawyers and, you know, all of that. It's out of our hands. But I just saw a couple of our tribal council people on my way here, actually, they're on their way to DC with one of their lawyers, and he said, we're asking for a hearing because we want the people to know, like I'm telling you here, they want the people to know what really happened, because people are getting false information. They're not getting the truth, and so he said that's what we're fighting for. So it's still happening, it's just that we're not hearing about it. So.
Okay, good. I think I said this. Go ahead.
So my question is like directly linked to what you were saying about substance abuse, pipeline restoration, years ago, from the tribal forces. What does the city will do with the offering resources for that as a college community?
Okay, good question. We do. We have we have counselors, of course, and then we have programs that are in place. If students are having any kind of issues, they could come to us and we can help them to get help. Many of our students though are that's probably why our numbers are so low, is that if they do have an addiction or they're struggling with something, then they're not coming to school. And so we're really trying to work with our tribe and our communities to try to get help for these students, because I know there's lots of students out there that could be at college, but they're not, because they have these addiction problems and they're dealing with that right now. So we work closely with our tribe and our communities to see if we can, assist, and if we can, what does that look like? So yes, we are happy.
What technology does the reservation use to preserve natural things?
What technology reservation needs to use?
You mean for like
Technology computer?
Not just things that you can use.
Yeah, what can you use?
Now, like clean energy technology.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, we do have, like I said, we do have solar energy. We have, I think that we can do a lot more with our wind turbines, because if you've ever come to North Dakota, it's windy there. And so it was odd to me, because we have a huge wind turbine, and sometimes it stops and it's really windy, and I'll say, well, why isn't that thing going? It's windy. But what happens is they turn off at a certain time, because they can get ruined if they're going too fast. And so I really think that we can do more of that. I'd like to see us again work on trying to get funding and work with our funders to see if we can get more. We did have a class also that we offered on wind turbines and how to work on wind turbines if there was issues with them.
We have one more question? Or two more? Go ahead.
So whenever you talk about government making it up to the people that get used, people often bring up, hey, this isn't my fault this happened. What do you think we need to do to get to the point where we get people to understand that it's an institutional problem rather than like something they did specifically?
That's a good question, and I think one way to do that is by all of you hearing it and understanding it and knowing that these are things that really happen. This is the truth. And so when you have leadership that know and understand the truth, then you're going to start to heal, and you're going to start to have wellness. So I say all of you.
Last question, Professor.
Yeah, to follow up on that, how can we be good allies from Connecticut to support this important cause that the water protectors have taken on their shoulders at great expense to their probably overall wellness and security themselves?
I think just to keep yourself informed as to what's going on, because it's not only Standing Rock, it's all over. Now I'm here in Hawaii, and so pay attention to what's happening. All of your young people, and you have great ideas. Pay attention, educate yourself, and always look for the truth.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Laurel, for such great insight. Thank you for such great insights and great words on the indigenous experience, especially with human rights and civil rights. So I thank everyone for coming out to the fall lecture series. I'm probably going to mess this up, as we say in the Lakota language. We don't say goodbye. We say until we meet again. Dosha?
Doksha ake.
Dosha, okay. Thank you guys.